Story 1. I messed up big time. I mean, I never thought I'd be in this situation, you know? But here I am, freaking out like crazy. Let me break it down for you. So, me and my fiancé, we had our first kid not too long ago. It was supposed to be this magical time, you know, bonding as a family and all that jazz. But then, bam. I go and screw it all up. I had an affair. Yeah, you heard me right. And let me tell you, I've never been so scared in my entire life. I'm talking terrified that I might lose everything I've ever cared about. And you know what? It's all on me. I messed up big time. It was a mistake, a stupid one at that. But I swear to you, I never meant for any of this to happen. Even if it sounds dumb, I genuinely didn't see it coming. Now, I'm just trying to figure out what the heck I'm supposed to do next before I mess things up even more. Let me give you a bit of background. Me and my fiancé, we go way back. I'm talking almost a decade here. We met when we were young, wild, and free. Well, sort of. My parents were super strict, you know? Like, no parties, no nothing. But when I turned 18, I finally got a taste of freedom. Enter Anna. She was my ticket to the wild side, my partner in crime. She threw me this epic birthday bash, and let me tell you, it was off the charts. But amidst all the chaos, there was Chris. He was like this magnetic force drawing everyone's attention, including mine. Now, I'm not usually one to swoon over a guy, but Chris was different. He had this confidence, this charm that just sucked you in. And wouldn't you know it, Anna had her eyes set on him too. Talk about awkward, right? Long story short, Chris and Anna ended up together. And me? Well, I stepped back, gave them their space. But then Anna goes and messes it all up, cheats on Chris multiple times. And guess who she blames? Yours truly. She accused me of spilling the beans, which I didn't, by the way. And just like that, our friendship was toast. Fast forward a few years, and I'm living in New York, working at this boutique. And who walks in? You guessed it, Chris. Talk about a blast from the past. We catch up, reminisce about old times, and before I know it, we're practically joined at the hip. Chris, he's this big shot lawyer now, making bank left and right. And me? Well, I'm doing all right for myself too, carving out a niche in the fashion world. Life is good, you know? Until it isn't. So, there's this party. My assistant drags me along, promises me a good time. And I figure, why not? Little did I know, it would be the start of a downward spiral. I end up taking some pills, not knowing what they were, and next thing I know, I'm waking up in some stranger's house. Turns out, this guy, Roy, was hired to make me cheat on my fiancé. Can you believe that? I was out of it, couldn't even think straight. And before I know it, I'm in the middle of a mess that I never saw coming. When I finally make it back home, it's like walking into a nightmare. My fiancé, he's devastated. And who can blame him? I betrayed his trust, shattered our relationship in one fell swoop. He moves out, we barely talk for months. It's like living in purgatory. But then, something miraculous happens. He forgives me. Can you believe it? After everything I put him through, he finds it in his heart to forgive me. And just like that, we're back on track. We get married, start fresh, with our little girl by our side as the flower girl. It's like a fairy tale ending to the messiest chapter of my life. But here's the thing. The trust? It's fragile, hanging by a thread. I don't know if we'll ever fully recover from this, if we'll ever be able to put it all behind us. But for now, we're taking it one day at a time, hoping for the best, and praying that we'll come out stronger on the other side. I hadn't seen Chris in ages, and suddenly there he was, standing in front of me like a blast from the past. It was surreal, you know. Catching up with him, reminiscing about old times, it felt like a dream. And get this, Chris. He's not just some ordinary guy anymore. No sir, he's a big shot lawyer now, working at some fancy schmancy firm. I won't spill the beans on the name, gotta keep that privacy intact. but let's just say he's rolling in dough. Comes from a wealthy family, too. His folks? Well-known figures in the community, the whole 9 yards. Meanwhile, the first over here doing my thing as a fashion designer, hustling at this luxury boutique. Can't say much about the name, but let's just say, it's top-notch. And wouldn't you know it, Chris starts showing up, like, all the time. We start hanging out more, catching up on lost time. Before I know it, our friendship turns into something more. A year of flirting later, Chris pops the question, and I'm over the moon. Our relationship? It's the real deal, you know? Can't spend a day apart, practically inseparable. And let me tell you, Chris's colleagues? They're green with envy. Proudly parading me around the office like some kind of trophy. Life is good, I'm telling you. And then, on my birthday, Chris goes and blows me away with this insane gift of $500,000. Can you believe it? It's like hitting the jackpot. With that kind of cash, I start my own boutique, and let me tell you, business is booming. Within a year, I've got 5 more shops under my belt. But wait, it gets even better. Chris gets a promotion, we're raking in the dough like there's no tomorrow. And then, he drops the bombshell. He proposes. And of course, I say yes. I'm ecstatic, can't wait to share the news with the world. So, I plaster it all over my Instagram, like any modern-day lovebird would. Next thing I know, Chris is buying us a house. I mean, talk about a dream come true. Sure, my parents were a bit hesitant about us moving in together before tying the knot, but I managed to convince them otherwise. And let me tell you, life with Chris? It's like living in a fairy tale. He's the sweetest guy, always caring and generous. Never raises his voice, even during our spats. And when I'm feeling under the weather, he's right there by my side, skipping work just to take care of me. I mean, talk about husband goals, am I right? Fast forward a bit, and we decide it's time to start a family. And wouldn't you know it, I get pregnant. Chris is over the moon, I've never seen him so excited. Throughout the pregnancy, he's like my knight in shining armor, always there to protect and support me. And when our little bundle of joy arrives, oh man, Chris's love for me just multiplies. Despite my insecurities about my post-baby bod, he's there cheering me on every step of the way. Our daughter. She's the cherry on top of our already amazing life, bringing us even more happiness than we thought possible. I couldn't help but share our joy with the world, posting pics and vids of our little family on Instagram. And let me tell you, the love and support we received? It was overwhelming. It's like our happiness was contagious, spreading joy wherever we went. So yeah, that's the story of me and Chris. From a chance encounter to a whirlwind romance, we've been through it all. And let me tell you, I wouldn't change a single thing. Here's to us, living our happily ever after. It all started 3 months after our daughter was born. Chris had to jet off to Italy for a 3-week work trip. Now, let me tell you, it was tough for me to say goodbye. I mean, we've never been apart for that long before. But work is work, right? So, off he goes, leaving me feeling like a fish out of water. The first week without him was like a never-ending Monday, you know what I mean. I tried to keep busy with work and taking care of our little munchkin, but it just wasn't the same without him around. I mean, this guy spoiled me rotten with his constant presence, and suddenly, I'm left to fend for myself. So, one day, my assistant notices that I'm not exactly my usual chipper self. Bless her soul, she invites me to this party, thinking it'll cheer me up. Now, I'm not really the partying type, but I figure, why the heck not? I run it by Chris, and he's all for it, thinking it'll lift my spirits. So, off I go, dressed to the nines in this little black number, feeling like I'm about to step onto a runway or something. And wouldn't you know it, I bump into this guy named Roy. Now, here's where things get interesting. Roy, he's like a doppelganger for Chris, only not as buff. I mean, the resemblance is uncanny. And get this, he starts chatting me up, saying he's a friend of Chris. Now, that struck me as odd, cause Chris never mentioned him before. But Roy spins this tale about how Chris sent him to keep me company, and I'm thinking, alright, maybe Chris mentioned him once in passing. So, we're chatting, having a drink or two, and next thing I know, I'm feeling woozy. Like, really woozy. I tell Roy I want to head home, and he offers to give me a ride. Next thing I know, I'm waking up, and we're not at my place. Nope, we're at his. And let me tell you, I was not happy about it. Roy tells me his car's busted, can't go any further. Now, me being me, I suggest we grab a cab. But oh no, according to Roy, it's too late for that. So, reluctantly, I agree to go with him, feeling like I'm about to pass out any second. Next thing I know, we're at his place. And let me tell you, I'm not exactly thrilled about it. But hey, he seems nice enough, so I figure, what's the harm? I ask him for some painkillers cause my head's pounding, but instead, he hands me a glass of hot milk. Weird, right? But hey, it does the trick, so I'm not complaining. Then he shows me to this room where I'm supposed to crash for the night. I thank him, close the door, thinking everything's cool cause, he's supposed to be Chris's friend and all. So, I try to call Chris, but guess what? My phone's dead. Figures, right when I need it the most. Now, here's where things get real weird. I'm thinking of taking a shower, but then I realize, I ain't got no clothes to change into. So, I plop myself down on the bed, trying to catch some Z's. But then, out of nowhere, there's a knock on the door. It's Roy, looking like he just stepped out of the shower, towel wrapped around his waist, chest all bare. And I'm thinking, what the heck? He says he's looking for his shirt, so I'm like, alright, whatever, just find it and leave me be. But then, he notices I haven't hit the shower yet and offers me his shirt. Now, call me crazy, but I'm feeling kinda dizzy, so I figure, why not take a bath instead? But get this, as I'm soaking in the tub, guess who decides to drop by? Yep, you guessed it, Roy. And he's not wearing a stitch of clothing. I mean, talk about awkward, right? I try to tell him to beat it, but he's just standing there, staring at me like he's in some kinda trance. And I gotta admit, as messed up as it sounds, it's kinda arousing? I know, I shouldn't be thinking that, especially with Chris on my mind, but hey, it is what it is. And before I know it, I'm giving into temptation, doing stuff I know I shouldn't be doing. And the worst part? Roy looks so much like Chris, it's like I'm seeing double or something. Things went from 0 to 100 real quick. I mean, 1 minute I'm chilling in the tub, trying to clear my head, and the next, Roy decides to join me. Yeah, you heard me right. We're talking physical closeness here. And let me tell you, waking up the next morning next to a total stranger. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I mean, talk about a wake-up call. My head's pounding, not just from the booze, but from this gnawing guilt eating me up inside. Turns out, Roy slipped something into my drink. Yeah, shocker, right? The guy was hired to mess with my head, make me cheat on my husband. And guess what? Mission accomplished, apparently. I was out of it, under the influence of whatever the heck he gave me. And just like that, I've gone and betrayed Chris, the man who treated me like a queen. I couldn't even look at my own daughter, the guilt was eating me alive. I should have known better than to go to that darn party. But no, I had to go and let my guard down. And now, here I am, stuck in this mess, unable to even figure out who put Roy up to this. It's been a week since it all went down, and Chris ain't due back for another week. And let me tell you, the thought of facing him again? It's terrifying. I've been avoiding his calls, too scared to even hear his voice. I poured my heart out, looking for some advice, some kind of guidance. I can't live with this guilt eating me up inside. I'm drowning here, desperately needing a lifeline. Update, fast forward 5 months, and let me tell you, it's been a ride. I took your advice, owned up to my mistake the minute Chris walked through that door. And let me tell you, I've never seen such disappointment and pain in a person's eyes before. It's like I shattered his world in one fell swoop. Story 2. Let me paint you a picture of what went down. It felt like I'd hit rock bottom, like I'd lost every bit of respect Chris ever had for me. I mean, the guy didn't even look me in the eye. He just disappeared into his study, locking himself in for what felt like an eternity. And let me tell you, those were some agonizing hours. I bawled my eyes out, but I knew better than to go banging on that door. It would have been selfish of me, you know. He needed space to process, to come to terms with what I'd done. I was ready to accept whatever he threw my way, even if it meant losing him for good. 'Cause let's face it, I brought this all on myself. I was naive, blinded by my own foolishness. Then, 2 days later, bam! Chris drops this bombshell on me. Forwarded me this message detailing every dirty little detail of that night with Roy. Turns out, Chris, being the lawyer he is, tracked down the source. And guess what? It led straight to Anna. Yeah, that Anna. She's the one who hired Roy, all part of some twisted plot to ruin us. I was fuming, to say the least. But with Chris by my side, we tracked down Roy and, eventually, Anna. And let me tell you, that confrontation was something else. Anna had the nerve to blame me for everything, saying I stole Chris away from her years ago when I spilled the beans about her cheating ways. And get this, she fed Roy all the info he needed to make her little scheme seem legit. So, there I was, feeling trapped, defeated. And then, out of the blue, Chris drops another bomb on me. He wants a break. He moves out, and we don't even talk for 2 whole months. Let me tell you, those were some dark days. But you know what? My daughter, bless her heart, she kept me going. And then, just when I thought all hope was lost, Chris comes back. Tells me he can't bear to lose me, that he still loves me despite everything. I was over the moon, let me tell you. And 2 months later, we tied the knot, with our little girl toddling around like the cutest little bride you ever did see. Life, my friends, it's come full circle. So, to anyone out there going through a rough patch, just know, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. And hey, thanks to all of you who chimed in with your advice. I don't even want to think about where I'd be if I hadn't come clean to Chris. Alright, enough about me, let's dive into another wild tale. You ready? Alright, buckle up, 'cause this one's a doozy. Now, picture this, it's April 2015, and Nepal's hit by this massive earthquake, shaking the very foundation of the land. And me and my fiancé, we're glued to the TV, watching the whole tragedy unfold, feeling the impact halfway across the world. Man, those reports, they were gut-wrenching. Over 8,000 people gone, and hundreds of thousands left with nothing, displaced, their lives shattered. The sheer scale of the disaster, it was immense. But for my fiancé, it cut even deeper. See, she had family from that region, so this tragedy, it hit real close to home for her. I could see it all over her, you know? The pain etched into every line of her face, the sadness swimming in her eyes. We'd been together for 4 years by then, first meeting at this volunteer gig in the city. Our shared commitment to giving back, it's what brought us together in the first place. I mean, I'd popped the question just 6 months prior. Despite our hectic schedules, we always held on to this dream of building a family together. And what really drew me to her in the first place was her incredible compassion, her selflessness. And let me tell you, seeing her react to the news about that earthquake, it was like a whole new level of empathy, kindness pouring out of her with every call she took. We both had ties to Nepal, knew people there who were now facing this unimaginable aftermath. And for us, there was no question about what we had to do. It wasn't a choice, it was a calling. We'd done our fair share of international aid work, you know, with groups like Doctors Without Borders. So, when this hit, we knew we had to get moving. I couldn't help but think back to all those times we volunteered together, the bond we shared in those moments, our shared goal of easing suffering in any way we could. And in the midst of this crisis, it was like I was seeing her true colors shining through brighter than ever. We talked about starting a family, building a future together, but life always seemed to throw roadblocks in our way. We'd even considered adoption at one point, just in case having our own kids didn't pan out. But with Nepal reeling from this disaster, all those plans, they took a backseat. Our focus shifted, you know? It wasn't just about us anymore. It was about stepping up, making a difference, fueled by this shared sense of responsibility and love for our fellow humans. And little did I know, this moment, it would be a turning point not just for Nepal but for us too. Because in the midst of all that chaos, her empathy, her strength, it only brought us closer together. Nepal, it felt like a world away, you know. And with all my commitments back here in the States, it was tough to just drop everything and head over to the earthquake zone. I always thought of myself as pretty adaptable, like, I could live out of a backpack if I had to. But the stuff I had going on back home, it just felt like too much to leave behind. I mean, I even tried to talk my fiancé out of going. We figured maybe contributing financially was the best way we could help. But let me tell you, she was relentless. Constantly on the phone, talking to folks from Nepal, getting deep into these passionate discussions about the victims and their struggles. Her empathy, man, it was on another level. Listening to her, I couldn't shake this feeling of guilt, you know? Like, here she was, ready to jump into action, and we were just sitting back, twiddling our thumbs. Her descriptions of what was going on over there, it was like I could see it all in my head, the suffering, the need for help. And that's when it hit me, you know? Her kindness, her drive to make a difference, that's what made me fall for her in the first place. And now, she was gearing up to go on this mission, all on her own. It was a whole new chapter in our relationship, man. If it weren't for my responsibilities here, I would have been right there by her side, no questions asked. But seeing how determined she was, it made me realize just how much this meant to her. So, I backed her up, you know? Supported her decision, even though it meant she'd be going without me. Watching her get ready for the trip, it was like watching a force of nature, unstoppable. She didn't even wait for all the stuff we ordered online, just packed up what she had and hit the road. And yeah, once she was over there, the reality of her rushed departure started to sink in. She kept talking about stuff she wished she had brought, regretting leaving so hastily. I tried to remind her to take it easy, you know, wait for the rest of our gear to arrive. But she was all about the here and now, focused on helping however she could. And with her mixed heritage, she stood out over there, which had me worried, man. But she was determined, nothing was gonna stop her from doing what she felt was right. Her being so visible over there, man, it had me worried sick about her safety, you know? Like, she was practically a target, standing out like that. But I was there for her, you know? Providing all the support she needed, financially and otherwise. Our phone calls became like a lifeline, keeping us connected despite the distance. She'd tell me about the folks she was helping, especially focusing on the hospital staff and medical workers. And to ease my mind a bit, she chose to stay in a Western hotel, in a safer area. But still, man, I couldn't shake off this feeling of worry, you know? I mean, being in a foreign country, far from the comforts of home, it had to be tough for her. And as her trip stretched from 2 weeks to 6, I started noticing some changes. Like, our calls were less frequent, and she kept needing more and more financial help. But with my work keeping me busy, I didn't really pick up on it, you know? Before I knew it, I was heading to the airport to welcome her back. And man, the excitement of seeing her again was just unreal. But when we finally got back together, something felt off, you know? Normally, I'd be the one making the moves, but this time, it was all her. And at first, I thought it was just 'cause we'd been apart for so long, you know? Like, maybe she was just trying to make up for lost time. But the thing is, it didn't feel right, you know? It was like she was going through the motions, like it was more of a chore than anything else. And even though I tried to brush it off deep down, I couldn't shake this feeling that something was off. Like, this wasn't the genuine connection we used to have. But I just chalked it up to us being apart for so long, you know? Just trying to reconnect, physically. Little did I know, man, that there was a whole other side to this shift in our relationship, you know? I mean, I was just taking in all this newfound affection from her, not even thinking there could be any hidden motives behind it. But then, about a month after she came back from Nepal, things started feeling kinda off, you know? Like, she was always glued to her phone, even when we were together. It was like her mind was somewhere else, even though she was right there with me. And that got me thinking, like, did something big happen during her trip, you know? That feeling of discomfort just stuck with me, man. And then, 2 months later, she hits me with this bombshell: she's pregnant. I was floored, man. We hadn't even talked about having a kid, and she was supposed to be on birth control. So, I'm like, how the heck did this happen? At first, she tells me she just forgot to take her pill, but that didn't sit right with me. I mean, she's always been on top of that stuff, you know? We never miss a delivery. And then, her story changes. She starts talking about how her time in Nepal made her realize she wanted to start a family. Now, don't get me wrong, her wanting to start a family after seeing all that stuff in Nepal, I get it, you know? But what bugged me was that she made this huge decision without even talking to me about it. I mean, we've talked about having kids before, but for her to just go ahead and make that call on her own, it threw me off, man. As I'm trying to wrap my head around all this, the whole vibe of our relationship starts to shift, you know? I'm torn between feeling stoked about having a kid and feeling uneasy about how all this went down. Like, the trust we had, it suddenly feels kinda shaky, you know? It's like those tremors from Nepal somehow made their way into our lives, messing with the whole foundation of our relationship. So, I start pushing her for some answers, you know? But all she gives me is this apology, like that's supposed to make everything okay. That apology she gave me, it was like a flashing neon sign, you know? It was telling me that something was seriously off, and my gut was screaming at me that there was more to this story than what she was letting on. With my suspicions growing by the second, I knew I had to get to the bottom of this unexpected mess. And then, one day, when she left her phone lying around while she hit the shower, I saw my chance to dig a little deeper. See, she's always on WhatsApp, chatting it up with her family overseas. So, quick as lightning, I linked her WhatsApp to my laptop using that QR code thingy. And let me tell you, man, what I found out was like something out of a soap opera. Turns out, while she was in Nepal, she was cozying up to some local dude. Their messages were dripping with lovey-dovey stuff, and they were even swapping non-explicit photos of their little escapades. It was crystal clear she was having an affair. But here's the kicker, she was struggling with the whole thing. Like, maybe she was worried about her safety, or maybe she was starting to realize that this whole thing was just a fantasy. And get this, she was sending this dude money too. And get this, man, some of that dough came from the cash I gave her for her trip. I mean, talk about a punch to the gut, right? This betrayal hit me like a ton of bricks, leaving me spinning with a mix of rage, pain, and straight-up disappointment. The trust that was the rock-solid foundation of our relationship. Yeah, that sucker was shattered into a million pieces. Piecing together the whole picture, man, it wasn't no walk in the park. It took me a good couple of days to connect all the dots and understand just how deep this rabbit hole went. From her acting all warm and fuzzy after the trip to the bombshell about her fling, it was like putting together a jigsaw puzzle from hell. But here's the thing that kept gnawing at me: why the heck did she decide to get pregnant, huh? And then it hit me like a ton of bricks, man. Maybe during this whole affair mess, she forgot about birth control or something, you know? Like, it wasn't part of her plan when she first dipped her toe into the whole cheating pool. So, once I put all the pieces together, I straight up confronted her, man. I laid out all the evidence, the whole timeline of events, right there on the table. And let me tell you, she was shook. Like, visibly shaken, repeating "oh my god" over and over again. I hit her with the big question: how long had she been planning to keep up this whole charade? And you know what she said? She didn't have a clue, man. She straight up admitted that she got caught up in the moment, didn't even stop to think about the consequences of her actions. But when I dropped the bomb that I couldn't just brush this off and move on like nothing happened, she was floored. Like, she couldn't wrap her head around the fact that I might actually walk away because of her little fling and the fact that she's carrying another dude's kid. In her messed up mind, she thought I'd stick around just because there's a baby on the way. She was almost equating it to that adoption idea we kicked around once upon a time. But she just couldn't see the huge difference between that and, going on a trip, having an affair, and then coming back knocked up with some other dude's baby. For a hot minute there, I even entertained the idea that maybe, just maybe, the kid could be mine. But that thought was out the window as soon as the whole truth came crashing down on me. Our trust? Yeah, shattered into a million pieces, man. And suddenly, we found ourselves at a crossroads we never saw coming. She thought the affair was just a minor hiccup, and she actually suggested we raise the kid together. Can you believe that? But when I made it clear that I was out, despite her being pregnant, she lost it. Like, she was straight up angry, feeling like I had betrayed her or something. It was like she couldn't even see that she was the one who screwed up big time. And get this, by the time I found out about her little fling, most of our family and friends were already in the loop about her pregnancy, and they all thought I was the dad. Talk about a mess, huh? But once I told her to hit the road, man, the whole story did a 180. Suddenly, I'm the villain in this drama. People started giving me flack, calling me cruel for kicking out a pregnant woman. But here's the kicker, they didn't even know the kid wasn't mine. Talk about a messed up situation. And then there's this expectation for me to man up. Like, what does that even mean in this messed up situation, huh? Shouldn't she be the one dealing with the fallout of her own actions? Responsibility should fall on the dude who actually fathered the child, right? Facing all this biased nonsense from our so-called friends, I decided to give them the ol' heave-ho. They just couldn't wrap their heads around the whole story, couldn't see the full picture. Thankfully, my family had my back through it all. Even though they had a soft spot for her, they knew where to draw the line. After our showdown, she couldn't really give me a straight answer as to why she did what she did. Sure, she said she still loved me, but those words rang hollow after such a gut-wrenching betrayal, you know? Love ain't about deceit and causing pain, man. My old man put things in perspective, though. Reminded me that we weren't hitched yet, which made pulling the plug on the relationship a bit simpler. But even after we split, she clung to this hope that I'd come crawling back. When she finally got it through her head that it ain't happening, she tried to mess with my career, shooting off messages to some of my colleagues. Luckily, most of them saw right through her games and had my back. This whole mess? Man, it's been a rough ride. I did love her, and in some twisted way, I guess I still do. But this betrayal? It's left some serious scars, man. I've been cautious about diving into another serious relationship cause, let me tell you, healing from this ain't gonna be a walk in the park. It's gonna take time, lots of it.